Welcome to Inside Outside Innovation with Navin Kunde. He is with Open Innovation, R&D, and a business networks leader at the Clorox Company. He talked with Brian about making external innovation a key part of their team's efforts to be prepared for the future. He also talked about the multiple components of metrics that they use at Clorox and how these metrics can help define what the culture of innovation is or isn't at a company. Hello folks, welcome back. I'm Victory Clafter, the producer of Inside Outside Innovation, the podcast that brings you the latest insights from people who know the most about building lean businesses, innovating within corporations, and disrupting entire industries with passion and precision.
So when we had a chance to talk in Orlando, you were at the conference and you were talking a lot about some of the case studies and things that you've been and seen. So I'd like to kind of start off. Tell the audience a little bit about your background in corporate innovation and how you got into the space.
Absolutely. I have been with Clorox in the Open Innovation Group for the last 7 years, and that's where I came into the company, and I continue to stay and work in that group. And what Open Innovation does is it brings external perspective and capability to all the different business units and functions of the company. Before Clorox, I worked at a consulting firm called the Corporate Executive Board. Currently, it's been owned by Gartner, based out of Washington, D.C. And I got into innovation when I was at the Corporate Executive Board and specifically got very intrigued by this idea of open innovation, which you can think of as innovation without borders, because in today's world, you can't do everything yourself. There's so many other people out there who are better, faster, cheaper than you are. And if you have the humility and the curiosity, you can actually do much better than trying to do it all yourself.
Yeah, I think that's one of the challenges. Like every corporations we talk to, in that they all want to do it themselves. You know, think they have proprietary knowledge and things along those lines. But to really get enough at bat appearances and to actually move the needle, a lot of times you have to do a lot more experiments, a lot more things, and reaching out to others and partners is one of the ways you can do that.
Absolutely. And, it's especially true in innovation. If you're going to truly do innovation where you are pushing the boundaries and going beyond your current envelope of what you know how to do, then invariably you're going to get into areas where you're not the knowledge or capability expert. And that's where you need open innovation. You need to have that mindset that somebody else or some company else out there that you could partner with is going to enable your success much more than doing it alone. There's a lot of core areas where companies are perfectly happy and are better off working on their own. But when you're truly trying to innovate and do what's next, that's when you need to look outside.
So talk a little bit about some of the challenges you've seen with companies actually being able to embrace open innovation.
A lot of it starts with, where do I actually need the open innovation mindset? So, is this a project or an innovation which is core to us, or is it beyond what we have? So first is really even framing it up and scoping it out. And a lot of leaders need to get that right first. Once you know what it is that you can do really well and where you need the help, then you can bring in open innovation team and say, here's my spec, here's what I'm looking for, and you can go and work in those areas and we can help them. In order to enable this, our open innovation team, we have a small group, like 7 people, but we have people embedded within the business units who are working with them on a constant basis, so that transition becomes seamless and they know, where the gaps emerge or where the teams need to go outside. Otherwise, it becomes a sell-in process and you don't really know them, and it gets a little harder. So that's one big thing is really knowing where your gaps lie and where you might be going into uncharted territory for your group or your company. The other aspect of it is when the Open Innovation Group, which tends to have its eyes on what's happening outside the company, can bring something very interesting to you. They might bring in some new technologies, they might bring in some new partners or things that might be interesting or relevant to your business, because a lot of times the folks in the business are very busy executing and dealing with market challenges. They may not always have the time as much as an Open Innovation Group could to keep an eye on what's happening outside of their 4 walls.
Well, I imagine that's a big challenge as well, from the standpoint of when you do come up with a new invention or a new opportunity, a new business model that you are executing on or experimenting with, and you eventually need to either bring that back into the company, not having those allies, a way to do that probably causes a lot of challenges as well.
Yes, absolutely. It's I put it like it's like a stepchild, right? I mean, you have your own children that you're trying to, resource and foster and move forward. And here somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, here's someone who's much better," and then it's really hard to swap it out because you're already embedded into it. But if you bring them along, along with the journey, then you can clearly see the advantages of something that may be outside of your company. But ultimately, it's about business results, right? It has to enable you to be better, faster, cheaper, or a little bit of all three in order for it to make sense. Otherwise, it's just easier to do it on your own.
Right. Yeah. The true innovation is value creation, not just invention. So talk to me a little bit about maybe some of do you have an example or two of where open innovation really made a difference in Clorox Company?
So we have this idea that there's a lot of knowledge and capability that resides outside of the company. And there are certain types of projects that call for us to go outside, and because there's a lot of because we need to tap into that knowledge and that capability. So what we've done is we have instituted a process where we have the open innovation leaders for the various business units understand and scope out whenever somebody is going into a new space, understand what their gaps might be and where they might need external experts or external capabilities that they need to bring into their team. And when we kind of create this sort of a spec, if you will, and then go out and bring those people in to inform the team, fill in their knowledge gaps, maybe even become part of the team as a part-time consultant or as somebody who can give them feedback on innovation plans and so on. That's a key thing that we've instituted across the entire company, specifically around R&D and innovation, where we look at, especially in projects where we are going outside of the core, because it's clear that we don't have the capabilities or knowledge inside as much as resides outside. So that's an area where we've done a lot of good work, and we are seeing increased momentum where, a few years ago, only a handful of teams were even open to talking to people outside the company. Now it's pretty much, it's an exception where somebody doesn't want to do it.
So are there particular examples or areas where it's easier to go and get that outside resource or help? So, for example, is it easier when you go out and you're trying to find, other core technologies to bring into an existing product, or is it when you go outside and you're looking for new market expertise, or are there particular areas that are easier to use in this open innovation, or to have the external be part of what's going on inside?
I used to think that it was easier in R&D or technology, but I think it's not true. I think it's easier in all of the areas as long as you know what you're looking for, and that's the key. Sometimes people have a very vague idea of what the gap might be or what it is that they're looking for. If you have articulated the gap very clearly, then it is much easier to find the right expert or come back and say, nobody else does this, we have to build this ourselves. Or there's one company that does this and we have to buy them, through M&A if you really want to do this. So it becomes kind of clear what the action is once you've articulated what is the gap that is holding you back. And whether it's I used to think it was more of a R&D or technology gap where you can go and fill that, but it could be a business model gap. It could be a sales capability gap. It could be a digital marketing gap. It could be anything where somebody else is doing something way ahead of where you are and where you want to be, and you can bring in those people to quickly bring you up to speed or even beyond what the state of the art is through finding the experts and bringing the partners in. So we started out in R&D because that was our hypothesis, but now we've kind of gone across functions, across business units, which is really cool.
That's quite interesting. Is any rule sets or things that you use as far as knowing when, like how early to go out and partner, or when you're kind of in that scanning mode, kind of that research mode, trying to understand who's out there and what's important, versus when you actually kind of engage and bring that external technology or business market or channel partner into play?
Yeah, we have a little of both going on. I mean, we have the businesses that have a need, and there's a clearly articulated need. You can go out and search by that. So, for example, if somebody comes to us and say, "I need to make this part, Internet of Things compatible," then there are a lot of IoT providers out there that can do that for you. But that's 2017. Back in 5-6 years ago, when this was all very new and IoT was not even coined as an acronym. It was an emerging technology, an emerging mindset, and there were people in open innovation that were going to these IoT conferences and figuring out what was going on and who was on the leading edge and thinking through which businesses or which products at Clorox could become IoT compatible sometime in the future. And then we came to the businesses and said, hey, here's an interesting technology that's coming down the pike. Are you interested? Here's how I see it working out. And then you approach it that way. So sometimes it's a push. And sometimes it's a pull. The best ways is even when it's a bit of a balance of both. And if you're not losing your credibility by always pushing stuff that is timing is way off from what the business is actually doing, you can accomplish that quite well. So right now, everybody's excited about AI, excited about augmented reality, virtual reality, blockchain, all kinds of stuff. And so we have to see if it's actually relevant to our businesses, but that doesn't stop us from learning what that's all about. Those are two different things, being curious about new technologies and new methods of doing things, and then applying the lens of, is this actually relevant for our business today versus can we wait a couple of years?
Right. And then how do you go about kind of measuring the results? Obviously, both prioritization and timing all come into play, but how do you know if you're actually making a dent in the innovation universe?
The simplest measure is they call us back to help them on the next project, right? And we continue getting funded. The Open Innovation Resource continues getting funded year after year by the businesses, or there's more demand and other people say, hey, I'm starting out in a new space. I need an Open Innovation Resource to create like an advisory board or whatever it might be, because I'm not as smart as I'd like to be right now and I want to get smarter. But a lot of times it's speed. We find that bringing in the external perspective allows us to go faster, and that's something we can measure. We can see groups that did bring in their external perspective. Either we were able to kill a project a lot faster because we found out very early on that this was not where we should go, versus taking 9 months and the team kind of learning slowly and then figuring it out. Maybe in 2 months we killed a project, and that's a success, even though the project was killed. In other cases, it might be a better outcome. So there might be some concepts that we were fielding in front of consumers, and concepts that got a good feedback from somebody from that field scored much higher than ones that didn't. So there's a quality metric, but it's not a hard and fast rule. But we typically look at speed and better ideas. Accelerating projects and better ideas as two of the metrics here at the front end of innovation where we do most of our work. Cost is another one that's important, but we don't focus on it as much at the front end.
Very interesting. So obviously Clorox has done a fairly good job of open innovation and kind of embracing this from a cultural perspective. Are there particular red flags or things that if some of our audience is looking at kind of creating an open innovation culture or a team around that, what are some of the things they should look at from a cultural perspective to make sure that this thing actually takes hold?
I think the red flags, there are, in the beginning, before it's sort of proven out, people are skeptical. How is this going to help me? I don't believe that somebody out there would help me. I'm not ready to share my problems and issues. There's confidentiality concerns. A lot of it is sometimes you get a not invented here, though I've seen less of that at Clorox than at other companies I consulted with, back when I was a consultant. But a lot of times it's like, hey, this might slow me down. This might take too long. I've got this, and don't slow me down by adding something that is just going to add a lot more complexity. And it's with good intentions. And if you can show people that this is actually going to add value, whether it's by allowing them to go faster or get higher quality ideas or higher quality concepts through, then then they would be more willing to listen. So one of the things we focused on is just reducing the friction in the process. So making things fast, so we can get, if somebody comes to us and say, I want this kind of an expert, it's not going to take us a month. It might take us like 2 days to find somebody. Setting that person in the system. In the corporate America, we have a lot of processes in place to, and mitigate risk and so on. And those can sometimes slow us down. We've streamlined that to make it as painless as possible and as fast as possible. So when you take away some of those barriers, then people become much more open to bringing in the external perspective. So the culture is closed, but a lot of times we can open it up by addressing some of their concerns and having that dialogue, expressing curiosity about why are you concerned, what's your biggest worry, and sometimes people are more afraid of the downside than excited by the upside, and so you just have to show them the upside of doing this.
Yeah, I think a lot of it probably also comes down to being very good at communicating the wins and being, like you said, going back after the first time and them having a good experience and saying, okay, yes, I can tap into that again because I see the value. And I've heard about other units that have seen the value, things like that.
Yeah, and you can, Brad, that's a good point because you can control the process, right? A lot of times the outcomes are out of your control. In open innovation, we manage the tools and the processes, but we don't really manage the outcomes. We don't know what's going to happen in the market. We just know that we got something to market faster and it was a better idea than we had before, but it may not be good enough or it may not have been fast enough. So then what do you do? But if we can make the process itself easier, they're more likely to come back to us. Otherwise, they'll be like, hey, this is so painful. I don't want to go through this again. So we focus on that, making it as frictionless, as seamless as possible, and then that actually opens up the culture more. And the same people will come back to us. They'll talk to other people. They'll say, hey, how come you guys got so successful, or you were able to? Oh yeah, we talked to these guys from Open Innovation, and they found us this expert, or they found us this one guy who looked at our concepts and said that doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that? And so you sometimes need that. You need that. Otherwise, you get into an echo chamber effect that can be very dangerous.
That wraps up another episode of Inside Outside Innovation. Thanks for listening. And thanks to Navin for speaking with us. If you'd like to learn more about the team behind Inside Outside Innovation here at Econic, go to insideoutside.io or econic.co. Until next time, go out and innovate.